Hello, welcome to the June 20th, 2023 Club Cubase livestream. My name is Greg Undo and I'm the host of the livestream today. If you have not attended a livestream before, how it works is you can ask questions in the live chat field or send questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. When asking questions, realize that my ability to answer questions in a real-time format may soon be eclipsed with the number of questions as we go through them. So if you don't see an immediate response to a question, if we could try to avoid asking the same question repeatedly, that would be appreciated and allows us to get through more questions. When you do ask questions, if you could specify which Steinberg program you're using. So if you're running Cubase, you could say I'm running, if you could specify if you're running LE, the different versions, LE, AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro, and which version number, such as 10, 10.5, 11, or 12, and which operating system. All that information would be helpful. Also, we should have all of the topics that are discussed in today's live stream pinned to the top of the comments field several hours after the live stream ends with timestamps, so you could navigate directly to a particular topic of your choice to see the answer. And if you wanted to search for topics that have been covered in previous live streams, you could go to cubaseindex.com. And Jan from Stockholm, who emailed me that he wasn't able to make the live stream today, he's been kind enough to create that index for us. So it's a wonderful resource. We have two people that serve as moderators. We have Agent K and Jazz Dude. So we're going to give special thanks to them. They're not Steinberg employees. They just really do it out of their goodness of their heart to make it a better community. We also want to give a special shout out to Jazz Dude for his work with the Cubase Nation Discord, which is a wonderful resource of information for DAW and Steinberg users. So once again, my name is Greg Undo. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America as a product specialist, primarily focusing on Steinberg products, amongst other things. And I'm the host of the live stream today. I am presenting from outside Washington, D.C. area, the United States, in Alexandria, Virginia. So if you're watching this live, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from. It's always fascinating to see people from all over the world on the live streams. So with that, we will go ahead and get started. Our first question is from Ace, who asks, hi Greg, hope you're well. Could you please tell me how I can attach an image to an MP3 file? Does Cubase 12 have that function, or can you recommend an app for that? Thanks. So I don't think it's available in Cubase 12, but if you have Wavelab, if you have like a file here, so say we have just normal 2-track mix. If we go to the metadata tab, which defaults to being enabled in the upper field here, and then we'll click on edit, and at this point we could see when we go to ID3/iTunes, at this point you could add the lyrics, but you could also just add a picture directly here. So while it's not in part of Cubase, you could do it as a part of Wavelab. So once again, go to may default to being kind of like a spectrum view, click on the metadata tab, and then click on edit, and then you could just see your select the ID3/iTunes and click on the picture tab, and then just add the picture by clicking on the plus symbol there. All right, our second question is, hi Greg, could you please show how we can make a brand new Groove Agent patch that contains various wave drum sounds and some effects, and save that kit to a new folder on external SSD drive? Thanks. Okay, so let's come over here, and I will just take a couple of audio files here. So this may be kind of a nonsensical drum sound, but you'll get the idea. So we're going to add a blank Groove Agent SE track. I'm going to select any number of audio files. So I'll just select, these are all kind of vocals, but just, and I'll click on the plus sign. And as we do this, let me just as we select all of these. I'll do this one more time. And where we see our 3 triangles, now we'll have like different samples. So we just have some, we'll just imagine these are drum samples. All right, so at this point, let's say if we have added effects, we could go to our mixer. So let's go to like our aux sends, and let's add a reverb. So let's say I wanted to take this particular pad, and we'll go to the amplifier section. We say, okay, now I want that pad to have a lot of reverb on it. I want this to have a little bit of reverb. And let's maybe add an effects, another effect. So we'll go to mixer, and let's add just a delay. Okay, and we'll make it just say quarter note delay. So we come back here to this. So we have reverb here. Okay, so once I have everything kind of set up how I want it to be saved, all you have to do is click right here to export kit with samples. And we'll just kind of see our different folders that we could access right here. So say, okay, we want to go to our desktop. We'll create a new folder. And we'll give it a name. We'll call it Ace. And you could give in, you know, we'll say, okay, it's from Ace Amadeus. And we'll call this vocals, whatever you want to. And you can put your own metadata. And now at this point, when you hit OK, all that information will be stored wherever you choose to save it. So you could just say, once you have all the samples loaded, just right click and export kit with samples. And choose the area that you want it to go to Ace. All right, so we see Thomas Petroff Jr. asks, I'm considering getting Nuendo. There seems to be a few features more than Cubase Pro 12. Is it worth the switch? It says, I'm creating a children's podcast with characters, Foley, etc. You know, there's going to be, if you're doing a lot of ADR functionality where it's going to be perhaps matched to the picture, you know, there could be some, you know, ADR functionality. So I'm not sure if you're doing just an audio only podcast, or if it's a podcast with video. But if you needed to overdub a lot of dialogue and have it kind of do the lip sync very easily, there's some functions in Nuendo for that. If it's kind of like you're recording it and you're comfortable with the editing in Cubase, then you're fine. But you know, you can have like a complete ADR solution. So you know, I would probably think that you could, you know, I feel that I could do a whole podcast very easily inside of Cubase. But depending upon, you know, if you're, you know, in where people will run Nuendo is if you're going to be doing some more creative sound design, if you need to have like a multi-bed Dolby Atmos, if you are, you know, taking every line of dialogue from a particular film and, you know, from that film and replacing all the location recordings, you know, with dialogue and to match that and to make that sync up for 30 characters in the film. You know, Nuendo has some more advanced capabilities for that. Also, it's going to have more game audio functions, some more extensive surround sound support. But I think that you could probably do everything inside of Cubase. I would, you know, as a company representative, I'll say, sure, upgrade to Nuendo. But if you really, you know, I would see if you could do the podcast in Cubase. I imagine that you probably could. And, you know, if you find that there's like, oh, I wish I could, you know, like in my workflow, if there's something that I could benefit from Nuendo then maybe consider getting the trial version and see. But if you've done the podcast already in Cubase, I think you'd probably find. I think I would feel comfortable editing audio, and I think I would approach it the same way in either program for a podcast personally. All right, so wonderful. See Kayega Menu, and he's in Chicago. So a long-time Club Cubase New York, Club Cubase DC attendee when we did them in person. So wonderful to see you, Kayega. Hope you're well. All right, so we have a question. Could you please advise on the quickest way to split a chord into separate MIDI channels with channel 1 at the top, etc.? Violin, viola, cello, bass, going to be 5-note chord with division violins. Okay, there's a couple different ways of doing this. One of them may be just to, let's come to our chord track here. So let's say we have some chords, and I'll just generate some chord data. I'll just drag this down to my roads part here. And we'll join these all together. All right, so when we look at our MIDI parts, we can see I guess we're going to have 4-note chords, but same principle could be applied. One way to do this is to go into the score editor, and then we could just say, let's go to functions and explode. And we can say, okay, to new tracks. And then at this point, as we do this, it's automatically kind of exploded out different parts. So be onto different tracks. So that's one way of doing it. There's probably also a function to do kind of within the logical editor. So let's say we want to take, let's say we have chords like this. And what we want to do, let's go to our MIDI menu to logical editor. And I think we could choose to extract to track. And we'll say type is equal to note. And we want to say the, let's say context variable maybe is going to be equal to lowest pitch. Or we can say note number in chord. So we can say, or position in chord. So we can say, so we want our root notes. So I could come over here, extract that, and let's say I want it to be a minor third or a major third. So I'll come over here. So say context variable is equal to position in chord. So we can say minor third and or major third. So now I could just say apply. And then we could say, do the same thing for the perfect fifth. So you could just kind of break apart different voicings like that. And as we do that, it will just automatically place those particular events into their own track. So you may see parallel octaves for the roots. So, but again, just to go to the logical editor, you could just choose to extract thirds, extract the fifths, and put those into their own separate track as well. So you could experiment with the explode function from the chord, from the score editor, or use the project logical editor. All right, so always wonderful to see Uno Memento from Finland. Glad you could join us. We see Jazz Dude on, and Sable Winters from Bay Area. She's like number 9. And if you learned a new tip or trick, make sure that you hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Okay, my chat field just jumped on me, so let me find my spot. Okay, so we see a question from Lars. Hi, could you please show how I can use sample, for example, with 130 BPM, not from the media bay, in a project with 120 beats per minute? Okay, so let's say I have just a recording. So I'll go ahead and render this file. So we'll start off with like a new file. So I'm going to, I'll just go to audio to bounce selection. All right, so we have a brand new file. And when we look at the information, if we go to like our pool window, you can see like my tempo here is 100 beats a minute. So we go to future chill. You see that this is set to 100 beats a minute. So this is our file. This is the file that we just made right here. So what I want to do is to just select, we see that we have the tempo. So in your case, maybe it's 130 beats a minute. So as I come over here, we would place it into musical mode. So let's say I go to, and I take this file and I'll just copy it a couple times. So I changed the tempo to 120 or to 130. Let me just take the tempo track off. So now we're at 130, 120. And let's make it 88, or not 360, but 88 beats a minute. So once you select a file and you make sure that you know what the tempo of the file is, you can place it into musical mode directly from the pool window, and that's Control or Command plus the letter P by clicking musical mode, or just by selecting the event and placing it into musical mode here. So you see that if it plays back at its original tempo, we'll see the gaps here where it's not going to follow the tempo of the project, but once it's in musical mode, it will then follow the tempo. Okay, so we have Roland Klein checking in from a sunny Kalmar, Sweden. Thanks for joining us today. All right, so we see Heartbreak Time Machine. Where can I set the destination track folder inside a project for rendered in placed tracks? I.e., I want all my rendered stems in a folder called, wait for it, rendered stems. You know, so if you just come over here, so let's say if you're rendering stems, just go to Export Audio Mixdown. And if we're doing a number of stems, so let's say we're going to take our instrument tracks or audio tracks, you know, we have a dedicated mixdown folder. So we'll see our path. You can now come over here and you could use the project audio folder, or you could use a subfolder called mixdown folder in case you don't want to call it rendered tracks, or you could just simply choose a folder. So let's say, okay, we're going to come here and we're going to go to, not to the mixdown, we're going to come over here. Let's create a new folder and we'll call it rendered in place. And then once we set that particular location, you know, we could just say, we'll, you know, as we do this, we'll say choose. And once you have the particular location that you want, hit save. And then when you export, it's going to go directly into that particular file. When you do like a render in place, as opposed to like a actual export audio mixdown, you could choose your full file path right here for all the rendering. So you could choose the rendered in place file right there, and all the rendered files can be rendered directly to that location that you define right here in the file path. So let me know if that's helpful for you, and glad you can make it again, Heartbreak Time Machine. All right, so we see from Dallas LaRue on the audio performance meter, the red overlight light at the right keeps coming on. The other meters are normal. So let's say make sure we're looking at kind of the same meters here. So let me just open up this project. All right, so you may see kind of just the audio, like the audio monitoring meter. So let's say if it's here, so let's say if I take this down, so it's usually if it's this meter in the lower right hand corner, and I have like, let's say this is clipping, and I'll just add some more gain to it, just see if we can get more. So we see that this is red. That just means that the levels on the mix bus are just kind of clipping. So you may want to just kind of bring that down, and then you could choose to, I think if you right click here, you could probably reset the meters, but now as soon as you do that, so it's probably just showing that you're clipping. It's usually not a performance indicator if it's directly there. So let's come over here. I'll just click into meters, and I think if you just, I think it's like control click or alt click here. So let's say we have this meter. I think if you alt or option click, that will reset the meters. So it could just be that your mix bus is overloading and going beyond 0 dB. So let me know if that's the particular meter that you were talking about right here, Dallas. All right, so we have Madi Tamori just saying hi. Thanks for joining us today, being on the live stream. All right, so we see from Dubious Brother, Cubase 12 Pro, Mac Studio Ventura. All right, so we see Tripwire on, just saying fascinating. Let me clear my throat real quick, hang on. All right, always wonderful to see Michael Pierce on, and he has a quick question. What's the easiest way to sort the routing in the mix channel so I can have two mono compressors working as a single dual mono compressor? I've forgotten. All right, so let's say if we're on a, so let's say we're on a, I'll add a stereo track. Okay, so now we're in our audio track, and if we wanted to assign two different compressors, what we could do at this point is let's put a dynamics on. Okay, so now that we're in the stereo track, we could go to the routing page and double click. So if I want to have, if we choose, I'll just come here first and say, okay, I want this one to be mono. And we can see that, okay, this is going to be connected, and I'll hit OK. So let's say I want to add a compressor on the next channel. And I go to the routing here, and we will choose again for this to be mono. Sorry about that. So we'll make it mono, and then we could open the routing editor or double click. And we could now process this compressor for the left-hand side and this compressor on the right-hand side. So that's how you could do different compressors. So it's like you have two mono compressors working as a single dual mono. So that's how you could do it if you needed to do it. So try experimenting with the when you're in the inserts at this point, click on the routing tab, and then you could have it be stereo or mono. So let me know if that's kind of what you want to accomplish, Michael. I'm glad to see you on. Glad you could make it today. All right, so we see Jazz Dude just mentioned there's a Wavelab 40% sales, and today's the last day, so make sure you take advantage of that. See AJ Soundbites just ask, "Hi Greg, how are you?" So I'm doing very well. Had a wonderful weekend, spending time with my family. So. Okay, so we see also, can you link parameters between the two plugins? So if we're still here, so if you wanted to link channels, let's come over, let's see if we could, so if it's on, so if it's spread across different tracks, so, you know, if this was going to be linked, you would just probably treat it as a stereo. But if you wanted to, let's say we had two mono tracks and we wanted to link the compressors on those. So let's say, okay, I have so right now, if I have these set to Q-Link and I have these tracks selected, so as I adjust the parameter on one, channels on both compressors will be adjusted once Quick Link is turned on, so they can function independently or with Quick Link adjust it, and both channels can at that point react the same way to the compressor. So all right, so we see Ted Carpenter says he's watched many times, but the first time joining live, he lives in DC, but vacationing in Accra, Ghana. So thanks for joining us and watching from Ghana. All right, so we see a question from Dallas LaRue. Sometimes I put an audio sample into Very Audio, no hit points show. Sometimes it's just a straight line. All right, so let's say if I come and we look at Very Audio here, just open it up in full sample editor. Okay, so if you see just kind of, so make sure if you see just the waveform, so make sure you do the edit Very Audio, and that should detect the pitches, but you may not see it if this is kind of deactivated. So make sure that you have the Very Audio activated right there. And sometimes also realize that Very Audio is intended for kind of monophonic sources. So if you're taking like a guitar part with chords, that may not be, that may not show well in Very Audio because it's intended for kind of monophonic sources like vocals or bass or saxophones, stuff like that. All right, so we have Jacques Herb checking in from Holland. Thanks for joining us today and being a part of the live stream. All right, so we see from AJ Soundbites, says trying to make templates with Contact as a rack instrument. After setting up MIDI and audio tracks, when I export it as a track preset, it only saves the folder and MIDI tracks. So, that's what a track preset could be for, like an audio or for MIDI. But probably what you may want to do is, let's say I'll add an instrument. I'll just do Hallian. And, let's say we have multiple instruments all going to different outputs. All right, so we go to our mixer. We'll just so let's say I'll have this going out of out 2. I'll say out 3, out 4. Okay, so let me save this as a track preset, and we'll see if it carries over. And I'm doing this as an instrument track, so we'll see. All right, so let's come over here. I'll just add this as, so we'll come over to user presets, track presets, VST instruments. All right, so we have our Hallian 7 multi. So now that we double click on that, we'll see our different outputs, and we load this up. So that all looks the same as what we see here. So if you're doing it with a MIDI instrument, and I realize that the MIDI may not tie, so let's come over here and we'll go to our VSTI rack and we'll do it in Hallian Sonic instead. Okay, so let's save this as a track preset. All right, come over to All right, so now we see our How Sonic Multi under MIDI. open that up. So now everything is still kind of loaded in. So let me know. So it looks like even if it's a MIDI track that the instrument is automatically preserved. And let's check the outputs of that to make sure those output routings are still set. So yeah. So let me know if I'm doing something differently. So I don't have a license of contact on this machine, but it kind of seems to work the same with rack instruments. Right. And you see just kind of a follow-up. Says I want to be able to do it so that the audio tracks, which are contact outputs, are saved too. So realize that, you know, once you have those, so, you know, as we've opened this up, I'll just do a new project. So, you know, it's probably going to make sense to do, let's do a brand new one. So we'll go to user presets, track presets, MIDI, and we'll see if this is carried over. So that's not going to carry over the outputs because the MIDI information itself isn't going to carry that over as part of a MIDI track. So you might have to work with it as an instrument track. So once I come to my VST instruments here, so go to user presets, track presets, VST instruments. So now we see our Halion 7 multi. That carries over all the different information. So just the MIDI information isn't, you know, saving as a MIDI track going to the VST rack won't save all the output routing. To carry that over, you're going to need to use instrument tracks instead. And you could have kind of a multi-instrument track like you just saw. All right, wonderful to see Soren on from Sweden. Glad you could join us. See from the Heartbreak Time Machine, just says export kit with samples. Like, oh my God, wow, okay, so that's good. All right, so we have Lennart Nielsen checking in from Sweden. Thanks for being on the live stream today with us. All right, so we see from the Heartbreak Time Machine says, when rendering a track, can I have it use the track name from the MIDI track it's rendering from rather than the VST output name? So currently it's going to be kind of set up that particular way. And we'll just show this. But it could depend on what settings that you're using. So if we go to this project, so let's say I'm just going to call this electric piano. All right, so now when if I select the event here, and the event here is called ePiano, that when we go to render in place, and we go to our render settings, so I think if I choose channel settings or dry, that it's now going to be rendered with the track name, as we see. But if it's going through kind of the master bus, or it's going through processing for like the effects, so we come over and we say the complete audio path, I think it's going to be just the stereo output R. So there isn't necessarily a way to do that, but you can, you know, the name of the audio file is still carried over. So when you look at the name of the audio file, which could be more, more important, and you also have the ability in the render place to give it a specific name. So let me just go back. I'll undo that. So let's render with complete signal path. And I'm going to choose not to have it automatically give it a custom name, but when we have the complete signal path listed here, we'll see that the track name will say stereo out, but most important thing is the file name itself is, we'll just say, like, you know, be carried over directly from the event name. So I'll make sure to mention again, I know it could be kind of annoying, but it's dependent upon the signal path. So if you aren't running it through all of your send effects, it will carry the name over. So. Okay, so we have a question for Ted Carpenter. It says, hi Greg, when using chord pads, each chord pad plays for 1 bar. Can you show how to get shorten the duration of the chords? All right, so let's take a look, see if we could do that. All right, so say we're in our Rhodes patch here. Let me turn off something real quick. Sorry, just had to shut off one computer with Alexa, and sorry, I didn't want to say that. All right, so let's say we'll come over here. Try not to trigger everyone else's smart speaker. Sorry. Then I out-clevered myself. All right. So we'll activate this. Okay. All right. So each chord plays for 1 bar. Can you shorten the duration of the chord? So, if you... So the chord will just kind of hold until, like, the next sound. So let's say if I just come over here and choose a different voice, maybe like a pad. All right, and we'll set this to MIDI channel 1. So it could be really just dependent, the length. So we can hear that like the Rhodes patch is kind of dying out as we do this, but the FM pad is carrying on as long as I'm holding it down. So it could depend upon the sound. So if you wanted to only play one particular note, you could just change the rhythm as you're doing it. So let's come over here and I will open up my virtual keyboard. So if you wanted to play shorter, it just depends on how so like as I play the chord pads in, and I'll just go back to this voice and so if I only wanted to play, for a shorter time, I just let go. Or if I hold it longer, just on the MIDI note that I'm hitting, it kind of determines the length of it. So as soon as if I trigger it from the chord pads, but if you just play it from a particular MIDI keyboard, but if you come over here, that will tend to sustain. But as you triggered from the MIDI keyboard, you could set the length like that just from MIDI note on and note off messages. So let me know if that makes sense. All right, so we see from Vishnu, hello Greg and Jazz Dude. There's his question is, if I want to export the stems and want to preserve mono tracks when I export, is there an option in Cubase? Thanks. So all you have to do is, it depends, like if you're sending the processing through like a stereo process, then at that point, if you choose, we'll just kind of show function here. Okay, so right now I have all mono tracks in this particular project. I'll just remove, I think we have a stereo track there. We'll just revert it so we can. So if you're choosing to include stereo effects, then it's going to be rendered as a stereo file. But if I wanted to, so I see all my mono tracks here, so I will go to my export audio mix down. And I want to just select multiple, and we'll take all of my audio tracks and I'm going to put it into a new project. So we'll say create new project, and under the effects, I'm going to just say inserts and strip. So now when I go to export audio mixdown, and we look at these in the new folder. No, let me just, I'm going to choose it to be dry from here in the export in the effect settings. So now our effects are disabled, and we come over and we can see that they're all mono files. So it just really is contingent. You know, if you're including processing that has you know, stereo effects on it, it will get rendered as stereo because it's creating what is actually, you know, being sent. But all you have to do again is to come over here and just choose on the effects, choose disabled, and then that will automatically render that as, it will keep the channel width for you. All right, so we see from Dallas LaRue, he asks, when I put a widener on the stereo master phase, the phase correlation meter goes to the far left. Is there any fix for this? All right, so let's say we'll play this track. I'm going to put on my master fader. So I'm going to come over to okay, so let's get to our phase. All right, so, and just to kind of get an idea, we'll add a couple of phase meters here, just so you can see. So let's say we'll do like typical phase scope. And I'll resize this or make it. So often when you're playing with wideners, you know, it is just affecting the phase. So we'll come over here. So say if we come over here to like the Imager plugin, and we start making different frequencies, and how you make stuff sound wider is often kind of adjusting the phase. It's kind of manipulating the phase, and that can make it sound wider. So if I kind of take the can see that that's going to affect the phase. And let me just see, I think you mentioned you put a widener on, so but generally putting kind of like a widener kind of function, that is how it's making it wider, is by just manipulating the phase. So that could be kind of expected. So let's say even if we wanted to go to like a stereo enhancer here instead. So as I increase the stereo enhancer, we can see that the correlation, and we can see if we go very mono, we can see that. So what you're doing as you're widening tracks is kind of manipulating the phase a bit. So we go here, it's very narrow, you'll see the phase is all the way to kind of the right in this particular meter, and as you add more, you can see that direct correlation. Just carry over. So I think it's to be expected for once you start adding kind of widener type of functions, that it will you will see that resulting in a phase. All right, so we have a question from Masta LBC. Asks, "Hi Greg, I'm looking for a used Nuage system. Is it possible to be used without the I/O system, just as a controller?" So yeah, definitely. So the Nuage is set up. There is I/O controllers, but that works completely independently of the control surface. So you could use whatever audio interface you want with the Nuage controller. So no problems there. They're completely independent. So. All right, wonderful to see Nick from the UK on. So glad you can make it today. Always great to have him on. All right, and we have Michael Marshall sending greetings from Somerset, UK. Thanks for being on as well. All right, my chat field just jumped. Let me find my spot. All right, so I think I'm back in the area. Sorry about that. All right. We see John Costigan just says, an easy way to be smarter than him is to hit the like button. So that's pretty wise advice, I think. So we'll all try to be as wise as John Costigan by hitting the like button. All right, from the Heartbreak Time Machine, best practice for renaming projects or project files, i.e. funnymoviescore.cpr to Paramount Pictures. Blah, blah, blah. So what I would do is just come over, there's always going to be the time when you need to go back to the original, and I would just do a save as. So I would say, okay, we'll call this Amos Moses, June 20th, 2023. And now, this way it could be stored into the same project folder. You could have multiple iterations or versions of that project. So I would just do the save as, and then you could save it directly into the same folder and still have access to previous versions if you needed to for some reason. All right, so we see from Ahmed Ali, says, "Hi Greg, just want to let you know that I got the surround issue resolved via our last session of Clip Cubase Live. Just came here to show my appreciation and respect for all the help you provided." So glad to hear it, and thanks for letting us know. Makes all of us feel good. All right, so we have Miguel checking in from Manila in the Philippines. Thanks for being a part of the live stream today. And Ahmed Ali says he has one or two further questions for later. So you could ask him anytime you want. So thanks for being on. All right, so we see, okay, so we see from the Heartbreak Time Machine, destination folder for rendered tracks. Now I mean the folder inside the project, a track folder, not an export folder. Okay, so let's come over. So thanks for the clarification on that. Sorry. All right, so let's see if we do. All right, so let's do a quick test, and I'll just take a couple of tracks here, and I'm gonna create them into the new audio track. Create new audio tracks here for 4. So we'll say export audio, and I'm going to see if they're selected once we're exported. So so it doesn't look like they're selected, but what we could do is let's see if we create, you know, at this point we could, you know, just come over, and if we have those selected, so I don't think it selects the tracks automatically for the rendered, but we could add maybe select the tracks to new folder and then name it. But let's see if so let's say if I have these tracks and if I want to put it into a folder named okay, so let's say I'll come here, let's put these into a new folder, and let's see if I move up. Okay, so let's see if we could create kind of project logical editor to do this. So you may have to select the tracks. Let's see if we could do this. Okay, so I want to take okay, so right now let's say I have these tracks selected, they're not in a folder. So I want to all right, so we're going to come over here and have a pre. And then, so that's going to add that. I want to navigate up. All right, and then I want to transform. We're going to say media type is, or we'll say container type is equal to folder track. And we'll say that the folder track property is selected, and we want to rename, set name, generate name of rendered in place. Or maybe we'll just replace. Okay, so let's see if we do this. And see if we could name that folder. All right, let me just. Okay, so. Okay, so I'm going to choose to, is set to selected. Let me try this one more time. So I know that you have to select these once you have the track selected. Let's see if this does it. All right, I think this might. Try this one more time. I think we're close. Let me see if I remove that. Okay, so let's take these. All right, so say folder, and let's see if we can replace it with rendered in place. When I undo just a name, it's actually chooses the name. So let me just set one more condition here. See if this triggers it somehow. So when I hit undo, then it's the name is carried over. I'll just try adding undo here. See if that makes a difference. So right now I click and I undo. Oh, didn't do it that time. All right. So I think I'm close. If you want to email me, I'll do some more time and I could show it on Friday's live stream. But let me know if if that is helpful, taking that approach. All right, so we see Jason Aker says, I have a couple questions regarding migrating from a Mac to a PC. So yeah, feel free to ask them. But it's very straightforward. I go back and forth every day between Mac and PC with Cubase settings and functions. So, but feel free to ask them in the chat field if you want. Okay, so you see Dallas LaRue is just talking about the audio performance meter at the top. Okay, so let's just jump back. All right, so let's see if maybe if I okay, so I guess it's this meter. Which is going to be this. So, if you're seeing a lot of, one of the things you could try to do is to make sure that as you're doing this, like if this is ringing high, that could be that that there's maybe something that's conflicting. If you see it kind of spike and then go down, spike and go down, spike and go down, that could be kind of indicative of maybe a display driver, like an NVIDIA display driver. If you put it to studio mode versus gaming mode, that could often do that. But let me know if it's constant. The first thing always to do if that is set to high is to go into your audio interface and increase the buffer size and see if that makes a difference as well. So sorry for my misunderstanding. All right, so you see question, when you save your key commands, do your macros save with it? Also, where do I find those files on Mac? So if you want to see your key commands, so we'll just come over and we'll set this. We'll go to key commands and I'll save preset. So we'll come over here, we'll save, we'll call it Jason. Okay, we'll hit OK. And to find it on Mac, you would just come over to your Finder. And then once you have kind of Finder window open, you want to hold down the Alt or Option key and you'll see a library. And then you could go to Preferences, to Cubase, and then you should see presets, and then you'll see key commands, and then the key command file that we just made is right there. So okay, so another question from Jason. What happens whenever you import the file into Cubase into PC? What happens to the key commands that contain the Apple key? So the Apple key translates over to the Control key on Windows, and the Option key translates to the Alt on Mac, translates to the Alt key on Windows. So it's always Alt, Option, Control, Command are going to be the same, and it'll just carry directly over. All right, so you see from Patrick, hi Greg, on Groove Agent in program menu, we have a repeater. C5 equals quarter, D5 equals 16th triplet, E5 32nd. How to trigger synth with it. I want to record that effect directly on other track. Okay, so let's come over here. And let me just go to different project. All right, so I'm going to add the full version of Groove Agent. Okay, so we'll just add full version of Groove Agent, and this has the performance mode. So we will come over and I'll just load up just a quick kit. Let me just find a beat agent kit here real quick. Okay, so now we go to our performance options. We'll activate them. All right, so I'm going to set up my performance options. So come here. Okay, so I want, and let me just check my octaves here. Okay, so now I want to, let's say as I play a particular note here, I want to okay, so I want to take, let's say all MIDI inputs here. Okay, so I want this note, so I want to take this particular bass and let's set the input. Let's try from Groove Agent. And make sure we have MIDI going to that particular track. Okay, I'm just gonna audition here real quick and all right, so here we can take kind of that one and we want to send that to another device. Okay, so we have this, and let's see what happens if we activate this. And on the synth bass, we have this set for All right, so I'm going to All right, so what I've done is I've taken this groove agent and we have this set for note repeat. And on this track, and I muted the groove agent, and on this track that I want the note repeats to be on, what I'm going to do is to set its input from groove agent. So now as I hit the pitch, and while both of them, make sure MIDI is turned on for both of them. So now if we wanted to just record that, all we'd have to do is just kind of place the track into record. So you can play one note to change the rhythm and our note to change the pitch. So at that point, we could just see all of your different note repeats that were just created just like that. So again, you want to add a groove agent track, and then make sure that you have the note repeat set up, and for the instrument that you want the note repeat to function, come over here and set groove agent as the input for that particular track, and then you can do note repeat stuff very easily. So let me know if that's what you're looking to do, Patrick. All right, we see Jazz Dude just mentioning that Spectral Layers 10 is going to be available on 2 days from now, so on Thursday. All right, so we see from Patrick Emmanuel A. just asked, is there any keyboard shortcuts to cut long notes according to grid size? Because each time I go catch sizer tool, hold Alt click. All right, so let's say, I think we could probably set this up maybe even in like a MIDI remote function. So let's say we have okay. Okay, so let's see. So I think we could just quantize the lengths, quantize the ends of notes. So let's take a look at this. All right, so let me go to my generic remote and see if we get this set up, or go to my MIDI remote. Okay, so I'm going to okay, so I want this to be quantize Get to quantize category. Okay, so let's say I want to quantize MIDI event lengths. All right, so I'm going to have this key activate quantize MIDI event lengths. So we hit that, and let's say I want to set my quantize value to, on this button, to whole note. Half note. Quarter note. Eighth. And say 16th. Okay. Okay, so we have 16th, 8th, quarter. All right. Okay, so now when we're here, I'm going to say let's quantize the length of this to half notes. Or we could actually do kind of a, it's going to be quantized, but let's think we could do it in the logical editor as well. So let me just try to do that in the MIDI logical editor. This would probably be a better approach. So let's say we want to transform MIDI notes, and we want their length to be set to fixed value, and we'll say I want this to be 1/4. So that'll be a quarter note. So now if I select the notes, so now I could take all of these notes here that are selected and make them all quarter notes. I could make them all, if I set this value here to 2, now all of the selected notes will be set to half notes, and you could then assign these to, to keyboard shortcuts. So if you want it to be a 16th note for all the length of notes, we could say let's put 0.0.1, and now every single note will be set to a 16th note. So you could just trigger these. If I want it to be a quarter note with a 16th note at the end, we could do that as well. So now everything's going to be a straight quarter note. So let me know if that approach is, and then you could save that as a keyboard shortcut and assign those particular keyboard shortcuts to keys that could be triggered. So you could just, again, say your length. You want to say your note and length set to fixed value, and this will be measure, beat, 16th note division, and the 16th note. So you have 4 16th notes within a beat, and then we have your 120 pulses per 16th note. So let me know if that is helpful for you, Patrick. All right, so we see Eric Sampson ask enhancement request. Greg, can you please ask the Cubase engineering to let us choose the different channel strip components? So if you want to choose, let me know if you want to see like any plugin that fits into the channel strip, or if you wanted to change the order, or if you wanted, what you wanted to do to change it. So if it's, allowing any plugin to fit in, that could be problematic. But let me know exactly when you about what choosing the different channel strip components is for you, or if Okay, so you see, you kind of follow. I want to be able to select my own components, EQ, compressor, gate, saturation, or maybe another complete strip like SSL 4000, etc. So I think that the that the other companies, I think, I'm not sure if anyone is locked out from doing it, but realize that we may want to, make sure that there is the channel strip that is available to all people. You could obviously run SSL channel strips as their own plugins. They may be able to. I'm not sure if the channel strip is open for third parties to do, but it could be. I think we wanted kind of a consistent functions that were always there. A lot of our key engineers will always want to just like they came up mixing on large format consoles, and they want the channel strip that that's going to be the same on every single source that they work with. But also make sure that you reach out to all the companies and see if they are actually want to do that as well. So all right, John Neves asks, Greg, how can I export individual track events bypassing the loop markers? All right, so let's come over. So let's say I have a number of events here, and I wanted to export these. What you could do, and I think this is added in Cubase 12, is we go to export. To export selected events. Let me just see if I have something else. So you should be able to go to export selected events, and we could say, okay, where do you want it to be saved to? So this way you don't have to set loop markers for each of the ones. So just select the particular events and go to export, and you'll see selected events, and this was added I think in version 12. And then from right there, you could just say export selected events, and then you could choose which processing. You don't have to set different loop markers for each of the events and kind of do it one by one. So let me know if that works for you, John. All right, so we have from Musweety or Musweety. Greg would like to know how to recognize phase shifting on a single mono, stereo, bass, or synth track regarding to phase shifting issues. Thanks. All right, so let me just come over to a particular guitar part here. Let me see if I have this in my recent projects here. Yeah. No. All right, let me just open it up here. All right, here we go. So generally, phase is going to be a relationship between two tracks. So, a lot of times mono, you may not, playing it by itself, it may not be out of phase, with anything. So it's going to be kind of a relationship between those particular tracks. I'm going to go to convert. Okay, so I'm going to play these two guitar parts here. So this is the left and right channel. So if I select one of the events, and we'll see invert phase, you can actually kind of hear how it gets very kind of mono-y. So I'll just put this into a quick loop. Oh, sorry. So, but if we wanted to see this, let's come over to our phase scope. So just come over to supervision, and let's open up another meter here so we could see it as well. So I'm going to add, and let's say like a multi-correlation in the phase. And this is a good one because you could actually kind of see which. So as we listen to this, if we don't see any frequencies in the red here, so as soon as I flip the phase on this, you'll notice that the metering will go very horizontal. And now all of these frequencies are kind of out of phase, and we'll see like our phase go to the left. So this is how you could see it visually between two tracks. So again, if I just flip it, change the polarity, you can see it visually and hear it as well. So that's a good way to know and see if your tracks are having phase issues. So anything in red there, you could see specific frequencies that are in or out of phase with the multi-correlation. It's really handy. So let me know if that's helpful. All right, and we see Eric just about the channel strip says we want to have third-party ones open by default in all the tracks instead of default stock plugins. So I'm not sure if that will happen just because we don't necessarily want to be, beholden to if, let's say, as technologies evolve, like, let's say we're all ready to go to Apple Silicon Native and SSL or whatever other company wasn't ready yet, do you want to be held back in your settings because, so having some of those functionalities, will allow you to, just like an analog console, if you want to have different flavors, you could patch it in, but we don't want to necessarily have the whole program be, affected for release and functionality for people based on third-party components as much as we can offer it. But you can still have access to, to all of your third-party plugins as well. So, but I'll pass it along as a, a feature suggestion regardless. So, so we see Gerald Ely checking in from Martinez, California, just saying hello, hey Club Cubasers. All right, so we have another question from Eric Sampson. Just says, to which Melodyne version do you compare Very Audio? So I think I'm not a Melodyne expert, so I think that the main difference is that you're going to have, polyphonic editing inside of Melodyne, and that's not currently possible inside of Very Audio. I think I've seen videos on Melodyne where, you could do tempo detection, but, and it's fine if your program doesn't have tempo detection. So I don't know the exact equivalent, but I would say that for editing, that's going to be the primary difference. I think that you also lose a lot of the integration. You lose integration with the scale assistant, I think. You can't quantize to the chord track. You can't colorize based upon the chord track in Melodyne. So, so I think the big difference would be, I think you'd have much tighter integration with Very Audio, and you also, but it doesn't have the polyphonic components. So. All right, wonderful to see Matt Elston on from London. Glad you can make it. It's John Costigan saying hi to Gerald Ely. And we have Razel checking in from Denmark. All right, so we see question, how to import MIDI regions from different sessions on the same particular tracks if both templates are the same but the sessions are different. So when you go to import tracks from project, so all you'd have to do, so we'll come over here and say import tracks from project, and I wanted to select this. You know, when you go to, I think we have like one MIDI track in here. So let's say, okay, I want to go to the pad shop here. So we'll see our destination track, and you could actually just pick the different destination, and then you could say, okay, I wanted to import it at the cursor position or the relative position or the absolute position. But you could actually just choose the track right here, and if your project has like the same track names, you could click on select matching, and then that would automatically match it directly to your particular track name. So if you had like, you know, roads in both projects and it was spelled the same, it would automatically assign it to that particular track, and you could just choose to import it at a different position so it's not on top of each other. So here you have destination tracks when importing, and then you could do that directly there. All right, so we see from Eric Sampson, is monophonic versus polyphonic the main difference between Very Audio and Melodyne? So yes, I think so. So in our question, any plans to support polyphonic in the near future? So, you know, generally we don't announce product features before they're released, you know, and if we do, it's just like a day or two, but they haven't made any announcements with that. So, all right, so we have Brian Sawyer just checking in from Beulahville, North Carolina, and he hoped that everyone had a wonderful Father's Day. So, and he had a great one himself. So I did as well. Thank you for the wishes. Very relaxing, and got to have a great end of school year for my son as well on the previous Friday. All right, so we see from Tree of Life. Hey Greg, how easy is it to create drum kits and shape samples in Groove Agent 5 Pro from envelope shaping to actually save and recall kits onto other computers? So we covered the save and recall kits to other computers already, but you know, it's pretty straightforward. So let's say if I wanted to come over and let's say I have some drums here. All right, so I want to take, let's add a Groove Agent track here, and we'll do just a Groove Agent SE. All right, and I want to take, let's say I want to build a kit from this multi-track drum performance that we see here. All right, so I have 2 kicks, 2 snares. So I'm going to just come over here. Let's just drag. I'm going to grab my range selection tool. I want to take just this particular. I'm going to zoom in here. And let's just take just those 2 hits. I'm going to raise this up. And we're going to just drag this onto our kicks. So at this point, we can just say, okay, we'll have, so if I wanted to layer these, and let's just choose maybe your sample start times. Okay, and let's say I just want to do for my snares, let's drag these over. All right, so let's say we're now All right, so we'll again layer these. So you could just kind of build kits like that, but let's say I want to, and we wanted to do like sound shaping with envelopes and stuff. So I'll do something where you could play back a particular pattern. So let's come to okay, so let's say we're going to play this particular pattern here. So let's say I want to take this snare, and I wanted to do some envelope editing. So let's say, okay, I just want to come over here to pitch. So I could just say, okay, let's adjust our envelope amount, and or you can say, okay, let's do fine tuning, chorus tuning. And if we wanted to go to other different filters, I could say, okay, I want to take, so let's say if I wanted to come to even a filter just on here, so I could select a pad. Let's turn our filter on. We'll say classic filter. And I just wanted to adjust, again, my envelope amount. But if we wanted to adjust and then even if you wanted to come over here to adjust like the amplifier, so okay, I want to take this sound and add a reverb on it. We could just come over to the mixer section and say, okay, let's get to an aux send. All right, so we have an aux on reverb 1. So I want to take this particular pad, go to the amplifier section. We could have, and even if we wanted to, again, come over and adjust our volume envelope of different components. And even if you want to go to the main area, say, okay, I want it to pan. Different sources. And then, you know, to make your own kit, again, to save it, to access in other computers, just export kit with samples. And then any kits with your own samples can be exported and freely shared or sold. So let me know if that's helpful. All right, so we see from Heartbreak Time Machine asks, are instruments compatible across DAWs, i.e. if I make a drum kit in Groove Agent, will it work in my partner's Groove Agent 5 and Logic as well? And recall kits onto other computers, or I'm sorry, will it work in Logic as well as my Cubase? So yes, it will. So it will just simply load up the particular kits in whatever version that you have access to. So it's kind of contained to whatever, to any program that's hosting Groove Agent, you could be able to load up the kits. All right, so wonderful to see Michael Teams from Weatherford, Texas on. So we'll get the virtual ice cream started. So everyone's always happy when Michael is on. See that Jazz Dude made new templates for Hallion Sonic 7 and Hallion Sonic SE3, going through all the presets loaded with chord tracks. So that'll be great to audition all the different sounds. Thanks for doing that. Okay, so we see, can I match loop kick with my own kick, like replacement of loop kick with our own kick? Okay, so let's just go over to so I'm going to activate this project and revert it. And I can show you how, if you have like a kick within a loop that you wanted to replace. All right, so we can do this inside of Groove Agent pretty easily. All right, so let's listen to, so let's take this loop here. All right, so I want to just take this to, I'll come over here. Let's get to this Groove Agent kit, and I'll just cut the kit. And I want this loop to be dragged in. Okay, so I'm going to create slices for this particular loop. So we'll go to our slice tab. Okay, so, and we will choose to do this based on transients, and I will set my threshold down. All right, so now as we play back this pattern, sorry, I'm just kill all the solos here. I'll just do it with a different loop here. Hang on just one second. Let's see if I have this in my recent projects here. All right, so now we'll take this loop over, slice. All right, so I want to take like these samples, and those are my kicks. So if I wanted to just come over to, say, loops and samples here, I could just drag the samples to replace. So I will all right, so let's see if we could copy this pad. And paste pads. Alright, so this is how we do it with SE version. So now when we play back, so that's how we could just replace the kicks from the original. So once we do the slices, now in the full version of Groove Agent, which I think you have if you have the note repeat functionality question, Patrick. So we come over here, let's lock this up, and so I dropped the loop in. So we'll go and slice the loop, and then once we're in so we'll come, and then there's a classify. See if I remember how to do this, but you could, but there is a capability to, once you classify, that you could replace just you could say this would be the snare. Let me see if it's a right click option. But there is, once we have the classification set, that you can say this is the one that's going to play back all of the snare sounds. This is the one that's going to play back all the kick sounds. But you could, replace the kicks within the loop, just like we did before in the Groove Agent SE. So. All right. All right, so we say from, we just see a question, is there a way to add an effect, a reverb, to a part of a clip that is highly, with the marquee tool, I guess maybe highlight it? So if you wanted to take just a portion of, so let's say we have, so if I want to take like this particular snare hit, I'm going to take off my snap. And then if you just go to audio and just say the plugins, we could just say, okay, now I want to just go to my reverb and say, let's just put a reverb on that. So now as we listen to it, and I'll just take it off the loop. So if you wanted to just, take a portion of it, you could hit F7, and that will open up like your, just the offline processing. And then if you have it set to auto apply, you could just come over here and just say, okay, I wanted to run this through plugins. So I want to take these and run it through a flanger. So now as we play it back, so you could just process just different sections. So now I want to run this through the reverb. And let's make it just a really big haul. So I have the flanger. And then you could just process different parts. And then anytime you could come right over here and just choose to delete or cut even after saving all that, and you can go back to the original file. So just select, highlight a part with the range tool, hit F7, or just say, okay, I wanted to come here, go to your audio, to plugins, go to your plugin collection, and just say, okay, let's just add reverb to that, and then it will be just processed. So, and that's really all you'd have to do. Then you select it, you could remove it again at any time. So let me know if that's helpful for you. right, so we see Michael Teams is dealing with very hot weather. Yeah, I think my brother has been baking in Houston. All right, so a question from Luigi who asks, I would like to know how the listen button on the mixer works. If I want to hear only the effect on the send, I always hear the source. Do I have to put the send in pre-fader every time? Thank you. All right, so let's go ahead and take a listen to an example. All right, so let's come over here and say, so if I want to hear just the reverb isolated, so when we come to like our effects, and let's say we solo the effect that the reverb is on, this also solos the source that's feeding it. So right now I have the control room enabled in audio connections, and I'm using my monitor here. So I have my Yamaha HS7s that we're using, and I have my output set to not connected. So when I go to my control room, so if I just want to hear the reverb, that's the reverb isolated. Like here, it's going to be on other sources as well. And then you have this little button here where you can activate to use after fader. So this would allow us to dim. If I set the dim all the way. So when I solo the track, it's going to also include the source. But when we click on the listen bus, that's just a reverb isolated. And then we could bring in the other sources to have them. So once we have that done, so with the source, and now just a reverb isolated. And then I currently have it in post fader, but let's say if I have it in pre fader. So it works either way. So make sure you have the the control room activated, and then you could do the listen bus, and then you could just do the listen dim down to infinity, and then you could just have that reverb isolated. So let me know if that's helpful for you, Luigi. All right, so we see from Michael Teams, howdy Greg, I was deleting some pieces of tracks and found that I was also moving everything after the pieces were being moved forward. First time I've seen that. So it could depend on, so if you come over here, let's say I take this selection and I hit backspace, it will leave that space right there. Now if I hit Shift X or Control, let me see if it's Control Shift X. Let me see if that's it. That will move the events over. So when we undo that, we can see that this event here is going to, as soon as I hit Control Shift X, we'll just get rid of that and move that event over. Now it could also be if you're in shuffle mode or events mode. So let's see if I delete this and I'm in shuffle mode. So if you're in shuffle mode, that will also just, when you delete the event, move the event over. But if it's in grid mode and I hit backspace or delete, it leaves the empty space. And let's see what happens if we put it into events mode. So if you're in shuffle mode here, that may also cause that to happen when you don't see it in grid mode. So check that out, Michael. See if that makes sense. All right, so we have Ninga saying hello. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we have David M, who's dropping in and out while on holiday. Thanks for joining us on your holiday, and we're glad to have you. We hope you're enjoying your vacation time off. All right, so we see Patrick Emanuel A asks, Greg, how to invert, revert melody with keyboard shortcuts? Is there any way? Okay, so let's say if we have a keyboard part here, let me just take this and we'll zoom in just a little bit here. All right, so if I want to select the particular events and invert it, so I think we could just go to find these key command functions under so let's come to, I'll set it up in my remote control quickly here. So let's do our MIDI remote. So I want this function here. Let's go to, and I think you'll just see it under key commands and probably in the MIDI section. And I think that there's going to be so there's legato. So here, if you wanted to assign this to mirror, so now when I go to take that, and then you could just undo. So if I just come right over there, you could, choose to mirror or unmirror the events. So let me know if that's kind of what you want to do. But you'll find the other functions. Let's say if we come over here to functions, you could reverse, mirror. All these functions are available as keyboard shortcuts. So if you come over here, it's probably going to be under the MIDI category. So there's mirror, and then you could also see the reverse functionality there. So you could assign those to different keyboard shortcuts or from a remote control controller. All right, we are blessed to have a Michael Pierce with a soup recommendation. Sorry, my chat field I may have just lost some questions. All right, let me see. All right, let me just find my spot. I just had a big jump in my chat field. Okay, so I'm back where I was. All right, so Michael Pierce is giving us his soup recipe of watercress, 6 scallion chop sweat, garlic, 1.5 pounds or so of watercress, the real stuff if you can. Great seasoned, then. So it sounds like a great soup recipe. Thank you for sharing. All right, so Nick is just commenting to Michael Pierce that all the cool kids are slapping the like button. It makes you smarter too. All right, so we have Cubase X sending greetings from Europe, and he's happy to be on a stream tonight. All right, so we see how to select all the first notes only on bar 1, 3, and 6 inside key editor with MIDI logical editor. So I think we could get it to within a bar to maybe select a first note in a bar, but I don't think we could have it automatically go for bars 1, 3, and 6, but we'll give it a shot. All right, so we want to select type is equal to note. All right, so we could choose, let's go to position, and we'll say try to think of it may not be on bar 1 or beat 1. So let's see if we do every other event. Yes, I don't think that we could have it go to measures. We could choose like around beat 1. We could choose like every other note, or choose like the first note, but not the first note in bars 1, 3, and 6 that I know of. But probably by the time you do that, you may just be able to look at it and hold down your shift key and say, okay, there's 1, 3, and 6, etc. So, but yeah, so I mean, I could select the first note. I could select notes around beat 1, but I don't think we could do. Then we could choose to skip particular notes if it's the same rhythmic value, but it may not always be the same rhythmic value with that as well. Okay. Okay, so we have a question from Ninga. Just asks, is there a way to add audio inputs, as in like different inputs, guitar, USB, and mic 1 and 2, instead of input 1 and 2? So if you wanted to label them, so it's going to be with like one audio interface, ideally, because we want your audio to be recorded in sync with each other. But when you go to the audio connections, if you wanted to just come over here, a lot of times you may just have a preset of like, okay, 1 stereo, but we could just say, okay, I want to add 2 mono buses. And if it's just like labeling, we could say guitar, and we can say that's going into input 1, and I want this to be microphone. All right. And when I go to a particular audio track, we can see the inputs, that they'll be kind of labeled as you've labeled them. So let me know if that's kind of what you but generally it's going to be, if you wanted to record from like two different audio interfaces, that's kind of, the problem with that is that the two interfaces may not be in sync with each other. So that's generally why you want to have like one audio interface. All right, wonderful to see Peter checking in from Montreal. We have lots of questions today. It's great. Thank you for all the wonderful questions. All right, great to see Gareth on from Bilbao, Spain. Glad you could make it. 3/4 a hot mess here. And I'll send you my feedback on the suggestions for the song, Gareth, maybe later tonight or early tomorrow. That sounds exciting. All right, so we see from Arnold says, "Hi Greg, I just discovered there's a possibility to use the 3D Connexion 3D mouse as a VR controller in Cubase 12 Pro under C Studio head tracking. I would imagine that you could use it to manipulate position and XY zoom levels at the same time. How can I map yaw, pitch, and roll map accordingly?" So when I've seen it, and I haven't worked with one, but we had one at Yamaha that we're using for trade shows when we didn't want to have goggles for like 3D goggles. So, but I think it's really, when you go to the, to the head tracking here, that you could just set it up as like a VR controller, and then I think that you can can kind of, maybe calibrate it here based on the positioning of the device. So I think that's where you do it. I haven't had any personal experience. I've used it at trade shows to kind of go to pan for like a 360-degree video, but I didn't actually configure it. I could do some more research on it and get back to you on Friday if you want to send an email to me at clubcubase@steinberg.de. All right, so we have a question. Is there any way to name the track event the same name as the track itself using a key command? All right, so let's say we come here. We'll say our piano on the event here is called True Pianos, but it's called Piano. So I think if we hold down Piano and maybe the control key and in the name field and hit enter, that will just rename all of the events. So if I want to come here, call it that, hold down control or command and press and hold that down, and then while I had the name field open, I hit enter, that will just rename all of the events to the part name. So there's not a key command, but just a modifier key. So give that a shot. Let me know if that's helpful, Ashlyn or Sean. All right, so we see Ninga just kind of about the inputs. It says, but to add other inputs. So, why, if you want to record from a USB interface from your guitar and a different interface from your microphone, you could do it under Core Audio on the Mac using, an aggregate device, or you could use ASIO for All on Windows. And the reason why most DAWs are set up to work with one audio interface is because if you're recording two different audio interfaces, those aren't going to ever be in sync with each other. And when we're dealing with, up to 192,000 samples per second, when the two devices can't resolve to a clock, there's no way for those to be in sync. So that's why it's kind of frowned upon, because we want to make sure that when stuff is being recorded, that it's actually going to be in sync. So you could try on a Windows platform using ASIO for All, or try using an aggregate device on Core Audio on Mac. I think that you'll find that the results are less than satisfactory. It compounds the latency, and generally the tracks will be out of time with each other. So it's kind of a bad thing to do. So. All right, Gareth says he felt an IQ boost the second he hit that like button. So that's good. All right, so we have a question. I need 2 colors in the track on the mix, one around the fader, one down on title. Is it possible? So I think it's going to be, when we look at the mix console, it's going to be the same colors. So the track color is going to be what is carried over into the mix console color here. So those will always be kind of tied together. So if I go to my quartet track, we'll see that's going to be this pinkish color. If I go to my vocal track, that's going to be the same. I could have these events, the events on the project window, these could be colored independently. So if I wanted to go to my color wheel, I could say, let's take the event and make it yellow, but have the track blue. So we could do stuff like that. But this color is going to always be tied to this color as it's set up currently. All right. Wonderful to see Peter checking in from Montreal. Hope you enjoyed watching the Grand Prix. Okay, so we have a question from Patrick. How to reverse MIDI notes, like each single note, not revert all? Okay, so let's say if we have MIDI notes here, let me find something a little more interesting musically. Okay, so I think if we come here, so let's say I want to take these notes and let's reverse them. So let's just come over here. So we'll go to functions. So the other notes haven't been affected before or after. So I'll just how to reverse MIDI notes, like each single note and not revert all. So let me know if that is kind of what you want to do, because we could choose just sections to reverse and other sections not to. So if I undo, redo, it's only those particular notes I selected that were reversed. But I'm afraid I may be misunderstanding. All right, so we see that in where Gareth lives, it's currently constant thunderstorms. So you'll have green grass. So think of it that way. See, the Heartbreak Time Machine just says, thanks for the Project Logical Editor walkthrough with the track folder. So I'll keep playing around with it, but I think I'm pretty close to it. But let me know if that's kind of what you want to accomplish. All right. All right. Just reading through comments. All right, so we have Daniel checking in from Munich. Thanks for joining us today. All right, so we have a question. Does Stream Deck be helpful for creating music in Cubase, or better to use key commands? Your thoughts, please. So what I think what most people use Stream Decks for is to control different functions. So I don't have my Stream Deck hooked up currently, but I have kind of a Stream Deck set up as a MIDI remote. So I actually went kind of like a maniac, and mapped every menu function in Cubase for like in every little pull-out menu, so I could access all these from the Stream Deck. So it's not necessarily, while you do that through MIDI, I wouldn't, I wouldn't be inclined personally to try to program beats or use it like a MIDI controller to input musical information. I would use the Stream Deck to access keyboard shortcuts and be able to customize window configurations, and all those functions that maybe if you can't remember the keyboard shortcuts or you don't know where they're located, to have access to have that control different aspects of the program. That's what I would use the Stream Deck for, not necessarily for playing a piano part or programming drums. All right, just reading through comments. See, it seems to be warm a lot of places. All right, so wonderful to see Benny from Sweden on. Glad you can make it today. And everyone is grateful for Michael Team's virtual ice cream. All right, Alessandro Braz asks, how do you change the grid in the MIDI editor to different grid size? I always have to zone in and out to change the grid size. Thank you. All right, so let's take a look. So let's say I'm in my MIDI editor, and we'll see this kind of grid view. So it may be set, so if you go just to the right of grid, it may be set to adapt to zoom. So as you zoom in, you see more grid lines become visible, and as we zoom out, like we see eighth notes or 16th notes, now we see eighth notes, now we see quarter notes, now we see bars. So it could be that you have adapt to zoom on. You could also just choose to use quantize. So if you say, okay, now I just want it to be fixed to where the grid is set to eighth notes regardless of what your scaling size is. But just to the grid here, you want to just make sure that you probably have adapt to zoom on, which will, as you're zoomed in, will make the grid resolution finer increments. And as you zoom out, it'll be less. All right. See, Rodem Pick just says thank you for the live stream. Thank you for being on. The live streams wouldn't be good if there was no attendees. So it's all about the attendees and helping everyone become a power Cubase user. So. All right, always wonderful to see Mr. Tim Weinheimer on from Mission Viejo, California. Hope you're doing well. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we see Charles asks, hi Greg, is there a way to import a rack instrument, multi-output, routing, inserts, and sends, etc., from one project to another one? It seems like I can't import those using the import track from project. All right, so let's see if we can do it from the import tracks from project first. And the tracks may have to have, let's just take a look and see. Sorry, my son is home for the summer, and you may hear him playing in the background with our next door neighbor. Apologize if. All right, so we'll come here and let's set these all to different outs. All right, and let's go ahead and add some effects. Okay, so we'll come over and let's see if we can, I'll save it as a track preset. I'll call it Charles Multi. And I'm going to save it as a project. Okay, so we'll come over and let's do a new project. And let's import tracks from project. So we'll go to our desktop. All right, so what I want to do now is we'll select all of, we'll say my input output channels and my Howling and Sonic. Okay, so we see all of my inserts are there. We can see all of the tracks. So that seemed to work. And let me see if I go to, also we'll go to add track using a track preset. Okay, so we'll go to here. All right, and we called it Charles Multi, so we'll go ahead and add that. And we'll open that up so we can see all of our instruments will be there. We see all of our outputs. Let's make sure all of our instruments are located here on the import tracks from project. So it seems like both of those worked for me. But again, it's probably not going to carry over with the rack instrument. But you said rack instrument initially, so I'll just try this. So I would, let me just try it with a rack instrument. Sorry, I missed that. So we'll come over here to our VSTi. So I think, that's going to just carry over. So, all right, so let me just go back to our previous Charles Multi. Okay, so I'm going to go here. All right, so let's do the rack instrument.
Can you say it again? Sorry, there is nothing to repeat.
All right, so we'll come here and do. Okay, so I'll just add MIDI track here. Okay, so we'll call this test 2. All right, so now this will, and we come here. Okay, so we'll save this project again. And go to new project. And let's import tracks from project. So I'm going to import the VST instrument and test 1, test 2. So and we'll import those. Yeah, so it doesn't look like it gets carried over with the rack instrument. So, you know, if you want it to do that, maybe carry over. I'll just try one more time. But I think that's why you want to have the... I'll just try it one more time, make sure that we... Let's check our input-output channels. Yeah, so, you know, it's part of the MIDI track isn't going to save that particular setup, but let me just, and it's going to show up as missing because it's not routed. So, you know, if you can work with instrument tracks, that would kind of, you know, make that all work for you. All right, so we see a question, how to quantize audio track. Okay, so let's come over and we'll just drop a loop in. Okay, so just drag this over. So, you know, your audio files. So let's make this large so we can all see it. All right, so really what we need to do is just when we go to the quantize panel over here, you want to make sure that the audio warp is on. And we'll say, okay, I want this to be quantized to eighth notes. And then as we do that, it will just automatically, you'll see that the events will, and if I wanted to add more swing to it, you can just come over and, so, but any audio that's recorded, just select it, go to the quantize panel, and then make sure that you have audio warp on, and then just quantize like you would normally do for MIDI information. All right, so we see from Michael Teens is granted my family and myself 1 gallon of frosty vanilla ice cream. So sounds great. And Michael wants people to smash the like button, and if you do, you get to win a prize. So maybe we'll get your own ice cream. So. All right, so we have a question. Hi, Greg. How can I open multiple MIDI tracks in Global Editor so I can see all MIDI info in one window and make edits? Thanks. Okay, so we'll come and let's say we'll go to Bach piece here. All right, so I'm just going to select, let's say my bass, a cello. I'm just going to hold down the control key, and let's say a violin, a viola, let's say a violin 2, and I'm just going to hit Control E. And now all of those different events will actually be, and I'll just make this smaller. And I'm going to actually switch these so that we could automatically change the color to our part color. So now we could see all of our different events here. And to edit a particular event, you can either just come directly here and you can see the name. So I say, okay, now I want to make the bass the part-time editing, or the cello, viola, or violin 2, or you could just click on it to make this the active voice that you're editing. So this is how you could edit multiple parts within one single MIDI editor. And if you wanted to look at that in the score editor, they would each show up on their own stave as well. So let me know if that's helpful for you, Georgios. See Capt Energy Music, just wishing a happy belated Father's Day to all the dads. So I hope everyone's was as nice as mine was. All right, you see Gareth asked to scoot, so thanks for joining us, Gareth. Hopefully we'll see you back on Friday. Okay, so we have Three Dog Recording Studio checking in from Riverside, California. Thanks for joining. All right, so we see Michael Teams was shuffling instead of gridding. So glad it was an easy solution for that. All right, so we see from Three Dog Recording Studio, question for Greg. Is there a way to recover all connections when I forget to turn on my interface? I have to remember where all my outboard gear I/O go to reset them. So, if you could always, just try to turn on your interface beforehand, it's always good. But one of the things that you could do if you have settings, if once you get to the audio connections, if you go to like your external instrument here, or like let's say for your external effects, is once you have that set up, just come right over here and add to favorites. And then even if it's, I think even if we remove that, we could go to favorites and just say, oh, let's just go to the Avalon. And at that point, you could just recall. So try just using favorites. So try to select it, right click and add it to favorites. And then you could just come right over here. So you could just click on it and just add your favorites right there. So give that a try just to set it up as a favorite. And I think that will recall the I/O routing once you have your audio interface back on. See, the Heartbreak Time Machine says every stream I learned something basic yet so useful. That's good. That's why we do this. And everyone runs Cubase for how they need to run it. And hopefully I could show you some tips and tricks. So we see from Little Wing Audio, hey now, thank you, Greg, for hosting these shows. Steinberg seems to have the users back. So, we like our customers. So, and we're grateful for all the customers. We know there's lots of choices, and we just want to make sure everyone is able to use the tools that they've invested in better. So. Right, Michael Teams wants people to whack the like button so I can be gainfully employed. So I like that. My son's college account will like it too. All right. See, Jonathan Manzo says, Greg, we appreciate everything you do for the community. Thank you very much. It's always very kind to say, and it means a lot to me to read. So thanks. All right, so we see question. Hi, Greg. How do you save a template without damaging the original? On the one hand, and not having to see that resolve missing files notification each time I open a new project using the template. So what I would do when I'm starting a template from a project is I may just do a new project, and we'll start from empty, because we don't want the, if you're building your template from an existing project, you probably don't want to have all of the media files. And I would start off by going to import tracks from project. We could choose a particular project here. So say I want this project. And then when we get this option, choose for the track data to be imported. I would select all and choose events and parts to not be checked. So now I come over here. I have everything set up in my template with my reverb, all my routings, all my settings, but there's no media involved with it. You could probably not include the tempo track or a signature track, depending on your needs, and then save this as a template because this has no audio files associated with it. So that's the easiest way to do it. You could do a save as under another name, get rid of all the audio files, all that, but probably just importing tracks from project and not importing the events and parts is probably a faster, safer way, and you don't have to worry about getting rid of, accidentally erasing audio files from your project that you're building a template from. All right, so we have Root Screen checking in from the UK, so glad you could make it and join us today. All right, so we have the Ninja Scared asks, is there a way for you guys to expand the current chord display in the MIDI editor? Maybe it could be bigger and show what we are playing live instead of what was recorded. So, if you want to see what is being played live, so there is kind of a smaller way to do this. So let's say if I'm here, we'll go to an instrument. All right, so once, all right, so, we could see the chord track. So if you actually just go to, and your project has a chord track in it. So let's say we'll add a chord track. Okay, so now we'll come to like our large MIDI editor, so we could see the chord track, and if you wanted to, take the existing chords. Now there is a current chord display, so like, while you're kind of playing, and let's say if we're recording, we could see the chords here. But you could also, record directly into the chord track. So if you just say, okay, I want to take these particular notes, and we go to, let's say, I think if we go to our chord track, we can say create chord events, and then, we could see chords directly in. But, so for the chords here, you can make that chord track pretty big for editing if you need to. And, but once you come here to, as you're kind of playing in chords, you could also just see the current chord display. I know it's kind of small, but but once it's in, you can have that automatically set for the chord track as well if you wanted to. So, but I think a lot of people will kind of start with the chord track as a foundation, and then you can make that really big within the key editor if you need it to, or in a project window. All right, hang on a second, just have to clear my throat. All right. Gerald Ely just saying the multiple parts MIDI editor tip is a wow moment for the day. So that's great. All right, so we see a comment from John Koskian. Hello, Greg. One of the most valuable features in the Cubase Hangouts is learning the thought process as you always demonstrate while troubleshooting virtually every possible problem. Thanks. Yeah, so I try to, come up with solutions for people. But yeah, I think, as you approach it, I always make the analogy, and probably many have heard it many times from me, like learning Cubase is like learning a musical instrument. So once, you're never kind of master it, But thank you for the kind words, John. Just hope I could be of help for people. All right, so we see the Heartbreak Time Machines just thanking us for today's stream, and he'll see everyone back on Friday. All right, so I think I'm caught up. Let me see. I thought I had. Let me make sure I didn't miss any parts in the past here. All right, just reading through back. All right, so let's move to some of the questions that were sent in. And again, if you need to send questions in advance, you can send them to clubcubase@steinberg.de. So let me just pop over to some of the mailed in questions. Okay, so we had this question on the last live stream of in Wavelab of how to show controls of two or more plugins at the same time instead of being kind of tabbed together. So let's take a look at that. Oh, this is from Michael Romanowski at Coast Mastering. I sent a video to him as well showing him how on Friday. All right, so let's say if we go to like our, and we'll do this in a, let's say a montage. And so let's say we go to like our master section and we go to add different plugins. We'll just say, okay, I want a magneto. And then as we add like more plugins here, we'll see that these kind of get tabbed together. So let's say, okay, I want to do frequency, and I may have already have changed this preference. So, all right, so let me just I had this preference changed, so let me just change the state of it. All right, so we'll see just like the little menu option here. Let me just. All right, so when we go to menu, we'll see plugin window handling. And at this point, we could choose to use plugin chain windows. So now when I go to add like different plugins here, I'll say, okay, let's just, I want to have master rig and let's say our dual filter and the reverber. So at this point, we could just go between the different plugin views like this. So they're all kind of, but if we, I think what Michael had wanted to see from last week was the signal flow and the gain structure going in and out of different plugins. And that's when we would go to this this particular menu. And I'll just go ahead and close this out. But as soon as you click on, let's say, the menu option where we were just at, that we could go to the plugin window handling and turn off the use plugin chain windows or one window per plugin. So that's how we could get that set up. Okay, the next question is, can you share some tips on MIDI CC editing, like how to see all visible CCs used in a project, in a part? Okay, so let's say we have an event here, and this event has maybe, velocity information. I'll just go ahead and add some different notes. We will have, let's say, some aftertouch information. Let's say we have modulation, and we'll have, say, CC7 for volume. We'll have CC10. So let's say we'll have expression. All right, so this could be kind of a typical view. Now, when we want to actually edit particular events, one is as we go into our controller lane, we could just, if we wanted to edit the existing CC information, just like we do for automation, I could take this information, and if we wanted to increase or decrease the volume or the amount of CC data, we could also come and choose to compress or expand the data. As we're here, we could choose to tilt from the beginning or to the end. So we could tilt our events. So a lot of great stuff that we could do there. If we wanted to take this particular automation curve, and let's say if we had a different track selected, I could copy this, and let's say if we go to right here to a different CC editor, we could choose to paste that same CC data into a different MIDI CC if necessary. Now, one of the things that's really helpful is as we work with multiple types of MIDI CC data that you may want to see different rows. So as soon as we come here, we could actually set up and click on the plus sign, and we could look, and when we see these little dots, means that we have CC data. So we could say, now I could add different CC data lanes so that I could come over and we could see all of the CC data. Now, if your controller lane, let's say your part is small in size, you may get a little message that the controllers, they might kind of get tucked away depending. So like if we have our controller lane here, and as we make this part our controller lanes bigger, we could now come over here, and as we add different controllers, these will become visible. So as I kind of take this line down, and if we extend this kind of vertically, you'll see that these controller lanes will just kind of disappear a little bit, so they'll kind of get tucked away. Now, if you want to immediately expose which controllers, by default you may just see, okay, just show velocity only. But if I want to see what all controls are visible, if you click on the little plus sign here, we could just click on show used controllers, and that will open up every controller lane that's visible within the visibility constraints. And if you find that, okay, these are the controllers that I always want to see, we could come over to our controller lane setup, and then we could organize presets. So we'll say, let's save this as, so I'm going to come over and we'll say, let's add a preset. So we're going to call this June 20th, 2023. And if I go from here to seeing velocity only, or if I want to, at this point, just say, oh, let's go back to that preset, then I could immediately show all my relevant controllers that I need for a particular event like that. Okay, so we have a question. Can you please remind me how to drag and drop a plugin chain from the mixer to the DOP all at once? Okay, so let me just go to different project here. Okay, so let's say we have like a bunch of inserts, I think, in this particular event. I thought we had a number of inserts here. So let me just drag some over. So let's go to our track presets. Let's see if I can get some with some more plugins on it. All right, so we have 3 insert plugins. So I think if we come over here, if we see it from the inspector, and if I wanted to add these to like a plugin chain, so I'm going to select an audio event. So we have the event selected. I'll go to, I wanted to take all of the inserts on this particular channel. And now I think if we just drag it, see if it just drag it right from our insert column right there, then we could create a new name. And now all of those plugins can be just applied to that particular file. So to get it in, just drag from the inserts right over here, and then you could just drag your multiple inserts and just treat it like that. So you want these plugins as your inserts, no problem. Just drag it right into the list, or you could drag it right into a bank and create a favorite. And then if you don't like that particular favorite, you could choose to delete. But you could drag it right into the process list or directly into the, if you wanted to save it as a preset as well. So if we come over here, we'll just delete all. All right, so we see, hi Greg from Soren in Sweden with UR22C on PC and UR22 Mark II on Windows laptop. I asked you about 32-bit audio on a Hangout. I suggested that Groove Agent drums would arrive in 32-bit. It exists in 16 and 24-bit right now. And your answers were something about the 32-bit cannot be used by all who do not have the hardware or something similar. That makes me wonder. If I set the project to 64-bit float and record with the UR22C, the recording will be in 32-bit, right? If I take that project to my laptop that only has a UR22 Mark II, will it be okay? Is the 32-bit audio handled okay on my laptops, or do I have to only work with the project with my UR22C converter? So I think once you have it in that, Cubase will automatically be able to play back multi-format audio, but if where you may run into problems is like if you send it to like a media player on a computer, or trying to play it to like a Roku or an Amazon Fire. Some of those devices and services won't be able to read that particular file format. So I think you'll be fine, but not all other services will actually be capable of doing that. Okay, another question. How to get the lower zone MIDI editor to display the grid in triplets. So we covered this a little bit earlier, kind of, but we'll touch on it again. So let's say when we are in our display, and it'll be the same method in lower zone or upper zone, but what we need to do is just to set the quantized value. So let's say I want to set it to eighth note triplets, and when we zoom in, we want to, where we see grid, we'll see a choice from adapt to zoom to use quantize. And now that we've used quantize, now we can only snap the note to being in triplets, and we can see that the lines, the grid here, so we see 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So if we switch this now to be eighth notes, we'll see eighth note grid pattern. If we switch it to 16th note triplets, we'll see 16th note triplet pattern. So just to the right of the word grid, where you see this little minus and a strike and a plus, you just choose to use quantize, and that carries over again for the lower zone as well as the independent editor as well. So just come over here, set the quantized value that you want for the grid, and for the grid choose use quantize as opposed to adapt to zoom. All right, so we have a question. Hi Greg, there is some weird thing going on in this project which I haven't opened in a long time. Look at vocal in turquoise. It is playing all right, but there's no audio event. Where is the sound coming from? I hope that the error goes through all right through the backup. Yeah, so, and they're kind enough to send the project. And it's kind of a strange one, but we'll look at it. Okay, so when we look at our particular file here, we're going to hear, so we'll just play it. And let me just make sure I have my...
המשכת, אין ערך לכלום.
All right, so when we look at this, all right, so what was going on with this particular project was, I may have saved it. Let me just see if I could revert this. All right, so the vocal is coming from this track here, but as we can see, there's no event that is on the track. So we solo this track, and we'll see that it'll start to kind of play.
שעברת אתמול
So we mute the track, so it's kind of like a ghost track that's empty.
נתת לי סיכוי.
Right, so the question is, why is this track playing back audio if there's no event that's visible? So when I looked at the track, I noticed that the track was frozen. So what I did with this particular track, when we looked at it, I noticed that it was frozen. So what I think happened is maybe it was deleted on the top layer, but the frozen file was still there. So I went into the project folder that was sent over. So, and if I don't go to the wrong program, it's a learned mistake on my part. All right, so we'll come over to projects. Let's go to our documents, to projects. I think we put it in here. And let me just see if it's in maybe the projects folder, or it might still be in downloads. Okay, so yeah, in downloads. So I noticed that there is this file called in the freeze folder called Audio 06, and I listened to the file and I dropped it in. So when we listen to this file, these two files together here.
שעברת אתמול ושלום אמרת.
And I kind of lined them up.
לרגע נתת לי סיכוי.
So I think that the project, you may have deleted the file on the event, but it was frozen. So it's going to be playing back the frozen file in the background. So we notice that we can't delete this. And I think this may have been imported from a like Cubase SX3 or something, or an earlier version. It says they haven't opened it in a long time. So I think that maybe the event was deleted, but since it was frozen, it's still referencing this audio file in the background that was rendered, and that's why you hear it. So I think that's kind of the mystery, is that it was frozen and maybe the event wasn't archived. The original audio wasn't there. So if we look at into the pool window, we'll see that there's an Audio 06 here, and that file, so if we drag this out, that maybe that file is corrupted somehow. But why we're hearing it is I think it's playing back the frozen file. So I think that's why we're hearing it there. So if you wanted to do some more work on it, just look in the freeze folder. And again, we could just come directly over here, and then I just kind of listened to him and dragged it in and lined it up, and then that would be the file that's playing in the background for you. So yeah, it's kind of weird to have like a hidden mystery part. I thought maybe it was hidden in the track visibility, but it didn't seem to be there. So I think it's just we're hearing the frozen file, but the original file isn't there. And we could take a look real quick, see if that is showing maybe even a different file folder location. So maybe that particular folder was lost somehow. So, but I think that's why it's playing back. It's just referencing the frozen file. All right, let's go back to our questions, our live questions. Thanks for, and once again, you could send questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. So we see Michael Pierce. I just see real quick. Zoom on the 27th. I'll make a little photo collection of Scotland. So I think we're going to be doing it on the 30th. Will be the last live stream of the month. So it'll be a week from Friday, I think is the 30th. Or a week from next Friday, rather. or a week from this upcoming Friday. So I think the last Zoom will be on the 30th of this month. All right. All right, so we see Michael Pierce had to sneak out, and he'll be back on Friday. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we have a question from Development of a Void. The question is, whenever I zoom in on a wave and cut it with the snipping tool, the project window moves away from the place where I cut. How do I stop that from happening? Okay, so let's say if we zoom in on this particular file here. All right, and I'm gonna have my my snap turned on, and you could hit the letter J. So say I want my snap set to bar. So I'm gonna come and try to cut. So I zoom in, I make a cut, and you realize that it may not, like the cut, it could be related to zoom. So you notice that when I try to cut here, because my zoom is, or my snap is set to bar, that it's only going to cut at the bar. So if I wanted to cut freely, try just to come over here and hit the letter J so that the snap is disabled, and then you should be able to kind of cut wherever you want freely. So give that a try and see if it's just a snap value. I'll just kind of read it again. Just the project window moves away from the place where I cut. How do I stop that from happening? So, so just see if, and it could also be, so let's undo that and let's check another mode. So let's see if we go to transport and see if we activate edit mode. That doesn't make a difference, but let's see if we do it with snap turned on. So it doesn't seem to move away, but try turning off snap and see if that makes a difference for you. I have a feeling that that may do that. And also, you know, make sure like you're set to grid. So let's see if you're set to shuffle. And let's say if we had a cut here, if that would. So this seems to kind of work as expected. But, you know, try turning off the snap, or make sure snap, try toggling that and see if that makes a difference. See, Sable Winters is clapping, just asking, what's the most interesting tip you learned today? So Michael Pierce is doing the first 20 minutes of the dual mono compression. We see Michael Pierce says he has a pain in the back of his head, so we hope you're feeling better. All right, always wonderful to see Drazi Eternal on. Thanks for joining. And Sable has been granted 1 gallon of fresh strawberry ice cream. All right, so we see from Charles says, I have to rewind a bit to find a question I asked a bit earlier. Thanks for the answer, Greg. It's always appreciated. I always learn something new every time I watch your live stream, so that's great. That's why we do them, so that everyone could be a power Cubase user. Okay, so we see from Alessandro Braz, could you please do a short demonstration of the chord pads feature in Cubase? Thank you. All right, so let's take a look. revert this project quickly here. All right, so let's say I have like a chord track. So let's say I'll just do Rhodes. I'm going to go to my chord pads here. So what the chord pads are going to allow us to do is to come over and we could set up our different chords to trigger here. So let me just set this to chord pads. Let's do it on a new project here. All right, so let's say I'm not a music theory genius of any kind. So I could come over and what I want to do is to play, and let me adjust my octave on my controller. So we could trigger these particular chord pads. And so I have this track routed so we could hear our chords. Now, if I wanted to add chords, I could just double click. I could just go to my chord definition and say, okay, I want this to be an E minor, flat 7th, dominant 7th. And let's add a 9th, and I want it to be a G in the bass. So we could audition kind of different chord progressions. So as we want to just play the chords, I could just immediately come right over here and trigger my chords to audition. Now there's all sorts of presets that we could load up as well. So we could load chord track presets. You say, okay, I want to be in the key of F, and so if I wanted to kind of just write a song, I could say, okay, I want to just add a chord track. And then once we're here, I can say, okay, I want it to be F. We'll go to B flat, C, and let's go to A minor, to E minor, or we'll do to G minor. And then C to F. So we could just kind of roughly build like a song progression. So as soon as we come over, we'll say, okay, let's have Howling and Sonic. And let me just loop all of those events. So we can say, okay, let's just build a song. So I just kind of used All right, so we could have our song. Now, as we want to be more creative with the chords, so we could trigger these chord patterns, and we could choose which particular notes are going to be used for setting up, what notes are actually triggering the chords. So if we want, we could choose these chords based on guitar voicings or piano options. So we could add basic players. We could also go to different voicing styles if we want more complex chords, or if you wanted to go through different custom voicings. At this point, we could see our chords based on musical proximity to our tonal center, or we could do it based on circle of fifths. So as we go around the circle of fifths, and we could have notes that are kind of on the outside. Now we could also choose to have different, not just playing chords, but we could have patterns. So if I wanted to initially come up with a quick idea, we could say, okay, I just want to, now we can go back to our chord tracks. And once we have these particular patterns, we could come over here and just say, okay, I want to take this pattern, and I could take my own events. So we'll come over to say loops and say, okay, I want to go to like an electric piano. So we'll say keyboard, electric piano. And let's say I want to take this pattern, and we could just import MIDI loops or drag and drop. So if we have this in a project, we could just open this up right here, and I can say, okay, now I want that as my pattern. So as I play the chords, now we also see that we could have different notes to trigger. But if we have this set to, so I could load in different MIDI patterns if you wanted to get the velocity from the pattern or the MIDI chord. But even if I now wanted to play this chord, we could choose to have different, let me set my, so let's say I have these green notes, and once I have the green notes, I could come over so, and if I wanted to just record these particular changes, so I could just come over here and say, let's just pop out here, and I could just place this into record. And if we wanted to also just listen to chords with different voicings, I could come over here. Or different tensions. And say, okay, I want this to be an F suspended 4 chord with the 7th and the 9th in it. So you could really kind of experiment and play with different chords that you may not have thought of. And it allows you to kind of, play around with additional harmonies. So the chord track could be like a really wonderful creative tool for a lot of different things. All right, so we see from Harvey Estrada, does Cubase have a reference track option in order to hear and compare your mix to another mix? So it's not an official feature, but we can show you how to do it very effectively. So if I wanted to do this, we could utilize the control room. So I'm going to come over. Come over and we'll just find this one particular file. Okay, so let's say I have my project here. All right, now I have a file here, and this track is muted, and I want to use this as a reference file, let's say. All right, so what this is, I'm going to take this reference track here, and I'm just going to EQ it drastically different. Okay, so what I want to do is, let's say I've just imported an audio file. Now, why we want to have a reference track is we may not want this particular track to go through the same master bus processing that's on the other tracks. So if I'm taking something that's been mastered and then running it through my mastering chain, it's not really a reference. It's not the same. So what I'm going to do is first to set up we're going to utilize the control room, and I'm going to create a Q mix. And you could do this by right-clicking. I have my 4 Q mixes set up here. And what the Q mix is going to allow us to do is to have an alternative routing. So I'm going to go to my reference track here, and instead of sending it to the stereo output, I'm going to choose no bus. And I'm going to go to my Q send and enable it and set it to 0 dB. So as we listen to it now, we solo this track, we're not going to hear it going through our main mix. So I'll make sure I have this set up correctly. So again, we'll say our 24-bit mix is not going to any target. So what I want to do now is we're hearing all of my other tracks, but when I go to my Q mix 1, this is only listening to this particular file. So now I could listen to my mix versus my reference track. So let's say, so this is my reference, and this is my mix in comparison. So again, this Q, this reference isn't going through the master processing. So if I turn this all the way down, it doesn't have any impact because it's not going through here. So this track is only going into the Q mix, and this is my mix that's going for everything else. So if I bring this down, that's affecting. So this way we could have a reference mix not going through our master processing and just easily switch back and forth between the two like so. So it's not as specific if you looked it up in a manual how to do a reference, but it's a way of getting a reference track done very efficiently. All right, so we see a question from Soren. The only way to do audio from MIDI in Cubase 12 is nowadays to mix down right, were it not possible to use group track and so on before. So let me see if, I'm not sure if it did like pass the audio through the group track, but let's see, I think I may have a Cubase 12 Elements installed. I'll take a quick look. So it might be just utilizing the export audio mix down. All right, let's see if we get this booted up here. not like it because I have two programs open. All right, here we go. We'll see if this is going to cooperate with us here. Yeah. All right. My Mac is not liking having two programs open. We'll see if we get it. Might be constantly switching sample rates between the two programs. But I'm pretty sure that the only way to get the audio is going to be to export the selected tracks. You go ahead and cancel it. So I think it's only Cubase Pro that does the routing through a group trick. Just see if I can force quit that out. Sorry. All right. All right, so we see Tony Hudspeth just saying, just apologizing for being late. We'll watch later, so you don't have to apologize being late. We're not in school, so we're just glad that you could make it, and great to see you on. All right, so we see from Ace Amadeus, hi Greg, on an old PC with Cubase 8, can I to plug in my USB key so I can review old projects and back up my old Windows 10 PC using Cubase 12 with the same USB-E licenser? So Cubase 12 isn't going to utilize the USB-E licenser, but your USB-E licenser that you had for Cubase 11 and earlier will open up your Cubase 8 project, so you could review. And that's why specifically that license, like when you go from your Cubase 8, if you went from Cubase 8 to Cubase 12, it granted you a permanent Cubase 11 license on your USB-E licenser, so you could run previous versions. So your E licenser will still work back and forth. All right, so we see from Ace says, hi Club Cubase and Cubase 12 Pro. I think not all the Cubase VSTs and sound sets are all using the new Steinberg licensor system. So a lot of people, there's a tremendous amount of them that have migrated. I spent like an hour or so yesterday just migrating licenses. But we'll give you the list here. I think Hallian needed to be updated to version 7. But most of them, the current versions were all transition. So we'll just Google it here. So you can see list of software relying on Steinberg licensing. So there's some new ones that just were released. So you can see the software is the Absolute, Backbone, Cubase 12, Dorco 5 for Groove Agent 511. So how you need it to be updated. So you can see all these different, so spectral layers 9 and spectral layers 10 when it's released in 2 days. So we can see all the different sound content. So there's a lot that's already been transitioned over to the new Steinberg licensing system. So you get a sense of how many titles, and it's a pretty good undertaking for like a year and 4 months of being on a new system. So it's a huge project for Steinberg to do that. Okay, so we see from Alessandro just saying, wow, the chord patch feature is very powerful. Thank you for a great explanation. So, all right, so we see from Ace Amadeus, it says, after creating chord tracks, how do you assign a VST instrument to use the chord tracks? So really all you have to do is you could set in the chord track to a specific instrument or any track that is set to monitor. So at this point, we'll have a chord track. Okay, so I could route this to a particular track. So as we're just, if we want to have one for like auditioning the chords. And let me make sure my control room is set so we could hear it this time. All right. So, or if you wanted to just say, okay, I want it use monitored tracks. So now any track, so if I come over here and say I want the synth bass, and you know, this, whatever tracks I have set to monitor. And if I say, okay, let's do drums, which won't make any sense musically. So all you have to do is just on the chord track itself, you could choose a particular track, or if you wanted multiple tracks, just select use monitor tracks, and then whatever tracks that you monitor will be sounding the chords at the same, auditioning the chords from the chord track. All right, so we see from Ace Amadeus, says, hi Greg, hope you're doing well. If I have Cubase 12 Pro installed, will there be a conflict if I also install Cubase 11 on the same machine, as I believe I need Cubase 11 to run older projects? Thanks. So no, you know, on my machine, I think my personal computer, my personal studio PC, I think I go back to Cubase 6.5, and I have every version going up to 12. On this machine, it came out after I got this computer after Cubase 12 was released, so I haven't put in Cubase 11, but you could definitely still have the older versions. You know, just because you have a later version, we don't make the earlier versions, you know, disabled like other companies, so that you're kind of forced to upgrade and deal with the consequences. So. Okay, so we see from Starholm says, I find it a bit untidy to work with folder tracks and group tracks separated. Is there any way to combine these as having a folder track that is a group track at the same time? The problem is that folder tracks can contain not only just audio or MIDI or instrument parts. So folder tracks can contain a video track. It can contain a chord track, a tempo track, so there's multiple types of tracks that could be put within a folder, and that folder, isn't necessarily all passing audio. Now, if you wanted to create a folder and a group track at the same time, there is a macro that comes with Cubase for this. So let's say I want to select these 8 tracks, and don't be intimidated by my macro list because I've created lots of macros for live streams, as you could see. But if we just go to the macros, there's one that comes with the program. I think it's just find it. Okay, so you'll see selected tracks to new folder and add group channel. So I do that, and I could say, okay, let's name the group. We'll say, okay, I want to call this drums. And now everything is going to be placed into the folder. And we see the track right here, the group track, is added to the bottom and all placed within the folder. So again, just go to Edit, to Macros, and you can assign a keyboard shortcut to it. And choose selected tracks to new folder and add group channel. But once again, the folder tracks, if we had folder tracks that were group tracks and then you put in, a chord track, or a MIDI track or video or, a transpose track. So a lot of different track types don't necessarily pass audio, but it's still beneficial to have them all within a folder track. So that's why there's kind of the differentiation. Okay, so we see a question from Harry Olive. Sorry if I missed that. Hi, Greg. How can I edit a MIDI track and have it automatically fit the correct key by a chord track related to? Okay. All right, so let's say I am, let's take, I think we could do it with the Bach piece here. Okay, so let's say in my Bach piece here, we have a chord track, okay? And if I wanted to edit it and have it stay within the key so that it's not going to, or within the chord or within the key. So if we go into our key editor, and I'll just do this full screen so you can see it a little easier. And we go to our scale assistant. So we can say, I want to use, so we look at our chord track here. So I want to just say we're going to be in the key of G major. Okay, so looking at this, so I'm going to go into the editors. We'll go to our scale assistant, and we could say, okay, I want to use from the chord track, but I could say, okay, we're going to be in the key of G major. And now we could do stuff like, okay, I want to do snap pitch editing. So as I come over here and I move notes up, it's not going to necessarily go chromatically. It's only going to allow me to snap these particular notes to like the chord track. So at this point we can say, okay, I want to snap, we could show the emphasis for the scales. We could also come over here and say, show me only pitches from the scale assistant. So I could only move it to notes that are within the particular scale. Or if we wanted to see all notes, now I can't move it chromatically. I can only move notes that are really kind of based upon the scale. So use the scale assistant, and then you could use the editor scale or used a chord track and be able to just simply switch. I'm just going to activate the project here. Sorry about that. So now when we go into our editor and we'll say to the scale assistant, we'll say use our chord track and snap. So as I snap, it's only going to allow me to go to pitches that are within the scale. So that's when you could use the scale assistant. So this way I can't knock it out of key. It's only going to snap to notes in the particular scale that's been defined, either directly in the editor scale, and we could have Cubase automatically do a scale suggestion for you, or you could use the chord track and use that as the basis for the chords. So let me know if that's helpful, Harry. Okay, so we see Gerald Ely just saying great stream, Greg, as always. I have to go, but I'll be rerunning this later after you do the index. Thanks for all you do. See everyone on Friday. So thanks for joining us, and we'll look forward to seeing you on Friday. Okay, so we see from CC says it's pretty handy. Didn't know about the macro. So yeah, it works out well. All right, so I think we are at the end of questions. Let's see if there's any more questions that come in. There's usually about a 30-second delay from when I speak, but I think we got through all the questions today. Thank you so much for all of the wonderful questions. And if you've learned a new tip or trick, make sure that you do hit the like button and subscribe to the channel, and that enables us to continue to offer this as a service so that you don't have to necessarily read through manuals and try to figure stuff out. You can just ask questions and get answers, so you can be a power Cubase user and get your creativity realized quicker and easier. And I want to thank everyone for spending part of your morning, evening, afternoon with me on learning some more stuff with Cubase. I feel good. I got the gold trophy from Agent K, so I feel like I earned my dinner tonight. But, I really appreciate all the wonderful questions and such an incredible community. And we do these on Tuesdays and Fridays, starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. So I think in the UK that's 6 o'clock, Central Europe 7 o'clock, California 10 a.m. So, but we'll see if there's any more quick questions that come in. If not, we'll wrap up a couple minutes early. And again, just thank you so much for all the wonderful questions. It's always fascinating to see. I usually learn new things on live streams as well. All right, we see Michael Teams is still on top of the ice cream distribution for Agent K, so it's great. Give it another minute, see if anything else comes in. If not, we'll wrap up. All right, Nick is wishing everyone a great week. We hope to see you, Nick, on the Zoom meetup on the 30th. All right, give just a little more time. All right, so I guess that's the end of questions. Thank you so much. And again, we'll see everyone on Friday. Everyone, please stay safe and healthy, and we will be back Friday. Take care, and we'll see you then. Goodbye.